Your parents were told one simple rule: work hard, and life gets better. For a long time, that rule seemed completely true. One salary often supported an entire family. Buying a home once felt like an achievable milestone. Today, that same dream feels much farther away. Something changed, but almost nobody noticed exactly when it happened. Today, people work longer, yet many still struggle to build wealth. So what actually changed? Most people blame inflation. Others blame technology. Some blame globalization. But none of those answers tells the entire story. To understand today's economy, we need to go back. Let's begin with one ordinary American family. Imagine it's the early 1970s. One parent works a regular, full-time job. The family buys a home, raises 2 children, even manages to save some money. Now imagine that same family starting today. The job looks different. The salary may even be much higher. But the house costs dramatically more. College costs dramatically more. Healthcare costs dramatically more. So where did all the extra progress go? The answer begins with one invisible shift almost everyone missed. And it changed the relationship between work and wealth forever. The story doesn't begin with smartphones or social media. It starts much earlier. In the decades after World War II, America's economy expanded at remarkable speed. Manufacturing grew. Wages increased. Home ownership became more common. For many families, hard work often translated into rising living standards. But economies never stay exactly the same forever. Global competition became stronger than ever before. Companies suddenly had access to workers all around the world. Technology also transformed the kinds of jobs businesses needed. Some jobs became far more valuable. Others faced increasing competition. This wasn't caused by one event. It was many changes happening together. Then, another powerful force quietly entered the picture. Housing prices started rising much faster than many incomes. Over time, that gap became harder for many families to overcome. Owning assets began changing lives in a different way. People earning only wages often experienced a different reality. The difference wasn't effort. It was what people owned. Let's look at a real example. Since the 1970s, home prices and household incomes have often grown at different speeds. The exact pace changed over time, but the gap became an important challenge. That changed how people experienced the American dream. Hard work still mattered, but hard work alone no longer guaranteed the same outcome. Something else had become increasingly important: access to appreciating assets. Then another powerful force quietly entered the picture. That's where the story takes an unexpected turn. It's also built from what your money owns over time. And that's where compound growth quietly changes everything. Most people spend years focusing only on earning more. But the next chapter explains why ownership can eventually outpace income. Most people spend their lives trying to earn more income. But income and wealth are not the same thing. Income is what you earn. Wealth is what you own. Those two ideas often grow at completely different speeds. Imagine two neighbors starting with exactly the same salary. Both work equally hard for the next 20 years. One spends almost everything they earn. The other gradually buys productive assets whenever possible. 20 years later, their lives may look completely different. Not because one worked harder, but because their money followed different paths. This is where compound growth quietly changes the outcome. At first, the difference is almost impossible to notice. Then, the gap begins widening faster every year. Albert Einstein was famously credited with calling compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. Whether he said it or not, the principle remains remarkably powerful. Time often becomes the most valuable investment of all. That's why starting earlier can matter more than starting bigger. This idea appears again and again throughout financial history. But one question still remains. Working harder solves many problems, but not every financial problem. Imagine getting a $10,000 raise next year. At first, it feels like life will finally become easier. Then something unexpected quietly happens. People often spend a little more as income increases. Economists sometimes describe this as lifestyle inflation. A nicer apartment becomes tempting. A newer car suddenly feels reasonable. Small upgrades quietly become permanent monthly expenses. Income rises, but savings barely change. Now let's compare two real financial habits. One person spends every raise. The other automatically invests part of every raise. At first, their lives look almost identical. Years later, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. This isn't about intelligence. It's about systems repeated consistently over long periods. Small decisions quietly become enormous outcomes. And that's exactly how wealth is usually built. But one final piece of the puzzle is still missing. The biggest financial shift wasn't working less. It was understanding ownership. Income pays your bills. Ownership can continue working while you sleep. That's why two people earning the same salary can build completely different futures. Money isn't only something you spend. It can become something you own. That simple idea quietly separates income from long-term wealth. History repeatedly shows the same pattern. People who consistently accumulated productive assets often increased their wealth over time. Not because the journey was easy, but because time amplified consistent decisions. The economy changed. The rules changed. But the principles remained surprisingly consistent. Understanding those principles changes how you see money forever. The goal was never simply earning more. The goal was building something that keeps growing without constant effort. That's one of the biggest differences between earning income and building wealth. Once you understand that difference, the world starts looking completely different. That's why understanding money is really about understanding systems. And systems quietly shape everyday life more than most people ever notice. The next time you receive a paycheck, you'll probably see it differently. Because every dollar gives you a choice, not just a purchase. I'm curious, what feels hardest to build today? A career a home, or long-term wealth? And what financial mystery should we uncover next? The next answer might completely change how you see the world.